Diablo 4 isn't about Lilith, or Hell, or Diablo for that matter.
You sure about that? You sure about that?
It's about loot. Piles and piles of loot as far as the eye can see. Man, the best loot is when someone does the hard work for you and you just get the rewards. So good. All right, so since the loot grind here is as strong as ever, we're going to go through the best ways to gear up and farm loot in Diablo 4. Let's go! Let me know in the comments what gear you're running and what class as well. First, let's talk about some general sort of gear tips, things to be aware of. Firstly, I've said this in a number of videos, but salvage your gear, don't sell it. Gold is worth nothing. You use it a little bit for, some various things, but the materials you get, especially from legendaries and rare, is the key thing that you really want, especially while you're leveling. Save as much of those materials as you can for the end game, and consider putting any legendaries you want to use throughout leveling into things that you don't replace very often, things like rings or amulets or even some of your armor, but don't put them in weapons, as you want to replace your weapons a lot when you're leveling up, just for that extra damage you get, even if it's just a small number. Also, some of the classes that can hold two-handed weapons, say like a scythe or a two-handed sword, in a lot of cases it's actually better to have two one-handed weapons, because in those cases you can actually have a legendary in each of those weapon slots, say one in your one hand and one in your other hand, whereas a two-handed weapon you can only put one legendary on that piece of gear, so you're sort of losing a legendary slot. But that's not always the case, depends on your build, etc, but it's just something to point out that you can sort of get an extra legendary slot by doing it that way. So let's get into those legendary farms and the best ways to get loot, really. So the first one is the way that you probably get loot for the most part throughout the game, and that's just bosses and elites, etc. But as you are leveling up and you come across events, you'll get these opals from completing events. In all the major towns there is an opals vendor that you can roll loot from. Now this isn't guaranteed to give you anything good, I've often got pretty bad loot from this, but it's just worth remembering that when you do events, and they become more important as you get later in the game and sort of get an end game, you'll do more events just because you're doing the Tree of Whispers stuff, which we'll talk about shortly, but you will get a lot of opals, and it's worth returning to town and actually spending these to get gear. And then even if you're not actually using any of that gear, you can salvage it to actually get the materials from it, so you can basically translate those opals into actual usable materials to make your own legendaries or something like that. The big one here in the end game, other than your typical things like world bosses and stuff, is really the Tree of Whispers. Now the Tree of Whispers will unlock as soon as you finish the main campaign. If you have actually finished the main campaign on one character, you can start another character and skip the campaign and just automatically have it unlocked. But the key thing with the Tree of Whispers is essentially it's like a continual loot grind method that you can do, where on the map various cellars, dungeons, and sort of side activities will be marked for these whisper contracts that you can do. Once you've done 10 of these, you can return to the Tree of Whispers to get a cache of a collection of targeted loot. They'll give you three options, which could be anything from your weapons to any of your gear, rings, amulet, that sort of thing. Doing the favors is pretty simple. They often don't take very long, and you can kind of just continually do these if you want to chase specific loot drops. For the most part, the major whispers give you 5 favors. These are typically dungeons or some harder events in the PvE zones. These are more or less the ones that I typically go for, because you just do 2 dungeons and then you get to go back to the Tree of Whispers and collect your cache, and dungeons give you a fair amount of loot as well. So if your main objective is to chase loot, then doing the dungeon favors is probably the best way to go, especially if they're close together. But in regards to the other events, if you've got heaps of them that are sort of interconnected, sometimes there'll be kill 50 of this type of enemy, but it'll also be in an area that's to collect something from those enemies as well, so you can sort of get 2 for the price of 1 in those regards. But just have a look at what's on the map and see what you can sort of get. And so once you've got the 10 favors and you return to the Tree of Whispers and you give you that option of a collection of loot, what you pick here is sort of entirely up to you and what you're sort of chasing, what sort of gear you want. Sometimes you'll get greater caches appear that have the sort of legendary color. Now these have a higher chance to give you more legendaries. It's not guaranteed to get them, but they do often give you more. And occasionally you'll see collections of chaos, which just give you a random assortment of different things, it's not things specific. And grab those if you're not looking for anything specific, but for the most part I'd either focus on the greater caches or focus on a particular piece of gear that you're looking for. Say, in my case, I really sort of want a new weapon, so I've been sort of looking for that for the most part. But you've got that freedom to sort of pick from what you want, and doing the dungeons and things as the favors is giving you that 2 for the price of 1, because dungeons often drop good gear. Then you can use that method to actually get some of the better stuff. The next is the Seeds of Hatred, or the Red Dust, and the PvPvE zones. I hate that verb. It's such a tongue twister, but the PvPvE zones. And so essentially what you do in these zones is there are specific zones that are the same as other zones, except PvP is enabled in them. And the difference here is any creature that you kill has a chance to drop seeds of hatred. Now these seeds of hatred can be converted into red dust, which in specific vendors you can trade, similar to how opals work. You can trade them for a chance at different gear. You can also use these for certain cosmetics as well. Once you've grabbed a fair amount of the seeds of hatred, like you need at least 3,000 to roll a piece of gear. So just sort of think of that before you go to one of these. In the zones, there are these specific altars which you will go to, and you sort of will stand there to like purify the seeds of hatred. This is similar to, say, Division, how you would, like, you know, collect loot and then you'd go to like get the loot out of there from like the helicopter. I can't remember what that's called, but I'm hoping someone in the comments knows what I mean. But you go to these locations, you have to like purify the seeds of hatred into red dust. Now, when you're standing there, like enemies will spawn and players will be aware of you, so be aware of that. But once you have passed that like event and purified the seeds of hatred into red dust, you can return to those towns to spend it on those vendors, whether it be for gear rolls or any of the cosmetics that you can get from them. So there are a few of these zones on the map and they're sort of clearly marked. You'll know when you've entered them. For the most part, I haven't done any PvP at these zones. Like most people are just sort of here for like the gear grind sort of stuff, which, you know, makes sense. You might get ganked occasionally or something like that. So obviously, you know, bring some friends if you've got them just to have that little bit of backup. But for the most part, what I've seen is people in these zones are really just looking to do the same thing that you are. So just be careful and mindful of that. But, you know, there's harder enemies in these zones and they're definitely worth going to if you're looking to level up and see the seeds of hatred, as well as like the Tree of Whispers, and the same as how we were talking about dungeons. In a lot of cases, the Tree of Whispers favors are actually done in these PvPvE zones. So you've got that option as well if you wanted to do that. And the last method really is sort of about world tier. So as you complete the game on world tier 2, you will have the option to unlock world tier 3. And once you've unlocked world tier 3, uniques and like sacred gear will start dropping, but you will have to clear a hard cathedral in order to do that, to unlock it. This is something I wouldn't worry too much until you've sort of gone through these other methods and actually leveled yourself up. You're really comfortable with your build and you've got like lots of legendaries, because unlocking the world tier 3 and actually doing that dungeon is quite hard. So I would initially focus on these methods that we've talked about, especially the Tree of Whispers. That's like the most comfortable farm because you can do that continually and you can actually go into dungeons and just like grind that out. Doing dungeons is also valuable because if you haven't done that dungeon, you know, you can complete it for that Codus of Power, for that aspect. So you can then imprint a legendary on gear, especially if you're looking to level up multiple characters and unlock legendaries. You've got that option as well. So I think that the Tree of Whispers is sort of the most consistent method for like grinding out sort of targeted loot and sort of what you're looking for. But, you know, there's obviously going to be like, you know, glitches, etc., that like have specific spawns over the time that are going to drop tons of loot, and you can go and do those if you like. But I'm a vanilla guy. I like to do what's actually in the game, and the Tree of Whispers, I've actually been enjoying doing those events. But let me know down in the comments how you're getting all of your legendaries and your favorite legendary. Thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.